Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes podcast, your weekly dive into funding, market, and investor news in architecture, engineering, construction, and supply chain. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode.
Okay, welcome guys. Today we have Patrick and we have Shub as a special guest actually. Hey guys, how are you?
Very good, sir.
Very good.
Good to finally see you.
Finally see Shub, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if I should feel slightly slighted by the special guest reference, because I feel like I've been on this podcast now, I think maybe 4 or 5 times, maybe more. So I don't know if it's often enough, or if it still counts as each appearance being worthy of being called special.
I consider you providing special value, special angle, so you're a special guest.
Very special. And you could be a resident, but for that you would have to get up earlier, but I know you like to sleep in.
I do. I do, but at unconventional times.
Yeah. No, for Martin, I think you have figured this out. Shub is a 4 a.m. early bird kind of person.
Yeah, I've noticed. Okay, guys. So today we have at least two prime subjects we will discuss. One is one of your portfolio companies. Well, I think it just become your portfolio companies. Window and door maker and Green Fortune raised $4.5 million in a round led by yourselves. So I wanted to take your view on why did you invest, what Green Fortune does, and yeah, let's start from there. Like Shub, maybe just give us a brief of what Green Fortune is.
Can I just say, Shub, before you say that, I just want to make a remark on the headline here. So the headline reads, for those listening on audio, window and door maker Green Fortune raises $4.5 million from Fundamental. Shub, it eerily reminds me of the headlines that Inframarket had in 2019 and 2020. Back then it was concrete and cement.
Yeah.
Inframarket, not exactly what they are today. So with that setup, tell us.
Yeah. I mean, look, so I have to say, for those who follow startups and VCs, they may be like, hey, what just happened? Are we now backing very traditional looking companies which are manufacturing doors and windows, which I think in most pockets of the venture world you think of as being more traditional businesses, etc. And I think this is a thesis we've been working on in-house for, I'd like to say, the better part of 2 years, where given what we saw in Inframarket, which is now evolved into a house of brands of different kinds of materials across categories, through what they call cloud manufacturing model. And what is cloud manufacturing? Perhaps that's a discussion for another day. But think of it as like a new age asset light model for manufacturing or getting products manufactured and then selling them under your own brand. So based on that, I think we started on this journey of evaluating opportunities to back new age companies, which through a cloud manufacturing model offer their own brands in specific building materials. That was one part of the thesis. The other part of the thesis was we were actually also, because we've now have some companies from our portfolio which are in the process of an IPO. Maybe a bit of a spoiler for what's to come later in this discussion. We were also looking at, hey, what kinds of companies even actually do well upon listing, because that's if a company or certain kinds of companies do well once they go public, it is also likely that there'll be demand for them in earlier stages heading into an IPO. And we were actually pleasantly surprised when we looked at publicly listed building material companies in India, that is companies with selling their own brand across categories, they were actually phenomenal performers in public markets in India, which may come as a surprise to many of the Western audience or followers of stocks in the US, for example, or other Western indices, which you don't usually associate building material companies with being excellent long-term compounders, but that's very much the case in India. And I think we, got around to doing some analysis, built a lot of confidence as to why that is the case in a market like India and what sort of characteristics we should look for. And so that's remained like a thing we are very, very keen to evaluate more and back. And along the way, we got in touch with Green Fortune. We're very impressed by the team, the founder here, or the founder and CEO, Dilip. He previously was leading the building materials category for BCG in India as a partner. So had built up quite a bit of understanding on how these different models work. And what they do specifically is apply, again, in an oversimplified way, a cloud manufacturing model to doors and windows. So connecting fabricators based in different markets, could be Turkey, China, Vietnam, etc. Also buying some materials from the European markets, but bringing it all together in a sort of capacity where you sort of offer capacity to smaller suppliers and provide your products as your own brand of Green Fortune doors and windows to developers, but also a direct to consumer product. Where if you're a consumer, in India right now, the options are usually you have to go up at the high end. Think of it like a luxury variant of a window or a door, or you need to go for something which is much cheaper but also substandard perhaps. There's like a missing middle where you're looking for a high quality premium product which gives you value for money, and that's the segment they're coming in. We really liked what we saw in terms of their execution, how the brand was getting built, the recall it represented with the customers, as well as very strong margin profiles through and through.
Okay, so that was the business was set up 2022, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is there any way? Why don't we have a cloud manufacturing business model in windows and doors manufacture in the EU, for example, in European Union or Europe in general, or US, or maybe we have actually.
So actually, Patrick may know this better. Maybe we can talk about the relevance of cloud manufacturing. But if you look at Europe, there are actually fairly well-organized firms solving for doors and window frames, etc. Firms like Schuko, if I'm not mistaken, do that, and there's a few others as well.
Very premium class.
Yeah. By the way, I also bring up Schuko because it's also a firm that's been in discussions with Green Fortune in various capacities, and I think. So there's a function of two aspects to this, Martin. One is the market structure in terms of what is like the missing gaps, or if there is even a gap in the market as to what a new cloud manufacturer could solve. And the second is, are there any large incumbents, or is it mostly a fragmented market? I think which is a similar theme, of course, where we keep bringing up. If you look at Europe, this is sort of like a problem which perhaps existed decades ago, I imagine, and the opportunity was seized by a few high quality firms, like Schuko being one of them, for example. I think in India, the first wave, if you will, of opportunities we've seen in building material categories have been mostly on the structural side. So you'll see cement companies, steel companies, paints, chemicals, adhesives. All of these have done extremely well as high quality companies. But stuff where there's some aspect of specialized manufacturing or interacting with fabricators is involved, that aspect where an Indian manufacturing base itself, that is only, I would say, has started leveling more recently. And therefore, I think that generation of companies, or that cohort of companies, in my opinion, is being built right now. So it'll probably take a few years until we see more mature versions of these companies come through in markets like India. Whereas in Europe, we've already seen that play out.
So help us.
Yeah, go on.
Martin, if I may jump in with one question, help us understand the demand side structure here. So the numbers I'm about to say are going to be incorrect. I just want to give you all a feeling for the ballparks. So again, these numbers are going to be incorrect. In the US, I would say based on, my family's experience, my experience, our experience, etc., probably, I don't know, 70, 80% of the windows are normed sizes. They're the exact same sizes.
Mm-hmm.
In Europe, probably let's not say Europe. Let's use Germany as an example. In Germany, probably only 20% of the windows are actually normed sizes.
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
And the rest are all like custom sizes to a specific project. These numbers are incorrect. How is it in India? Where does India lean today?
So I must confess, I haven't actually done this specific study, but if you put me on the spot and ask for it, I would have to guess the proportion would be single digits. It's only a single digit proportion, which is highly standardized.
Oh, interesting.
So it's very fragmented then.
Yeah.
You would say.
Yeah.
Hold on. Does that mean that for every project I'm doing, I have basically custom manufactured windows to that project?
Generally speaking, yes.
Oh, interesting.
So it's either that or, for example, in the case of new developments like multifamily properties, apartment complexes, etc., the developer sort of takes a call.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then it is custom for that development, but it is implemented across the different homes in that development.
That's exactly the same how a lot of Europe would do it, leading with Germany. Exactly. Which, by the way, now Martin, coming back to your question again, actually that's why in this category you will actually have manufacturers in Europe that are local, domestic, that still produce and manufacture domestic, which is not the norm across many other building materials categories. And they integrate it forward with installation capacities. So actually you will have window installer companies that work regionally, so relatively large, or sometimes even nationally here, that have backwards integrated with manufacturing. So for example, there is one in my region where I live in Germany that after the German reunification used East Germany to build up manufacturing capacities, but they were originally a window installer company only. And so that has happened because the share of custom windows is so high.
Yeah, every time I hear custom windows or non-standard size, everyone is kind of backing in the type of products I work on, as it's mean costs. And like when you said there's a lot of variety in India, it says to me that it's much more, people are much more agile and easier to adjust, and it doesn't brings the cost to the roof straight away once you start thinking about more customized sizes of windows. Whereas here in the UK, every single time, it's custom size. Everyone is like, 50% more expensive. We're not going there.
Yeah. I hear you. I think that is definitely one way of interpreting it, and probably one explanation of the root cause. I would argue, I think the supply and demand sort of go in tandem, and I think the market as it exists today is forced to operate in that fashion because for various reasons the supply has not leveled up in response to what might be other forms of demand. The demand itself was building up as the economic power, the purchasing capacity, etc., of the demand base in India was building up. So I think we're now getting to a point where the demand has progressed to a higher level, and therefore now the supply needs to catch up with more options, more specificity, more standardization, and not having to do everything custom made each time.
Okay, so you want to ask something, Patrick?
Martin, just one additional comment in here. So I think something that homeowners, builders, developers are very aware of, but sometimes we in the VC bubble maybe aren't really aware of, is just how important the building envelope is to the whole construction project. If you want to truly achieve great energy efficiency, great noise profile of a building, the building envelope, how you insulate it, is going to be very important. And so, actually, okay, I couldn't make this up. Now, automatically, the shutters on my window are coming down as I'm saying this. Great.
Nice.
So thanks, universe. And the windows are the one part of the building where I'm actually cutting out a hole into my building envelope. You know, when I'm saying this to people from the construction industry, they will be like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I'm right now talking to the tech people. You have to realize this, right? So we're literally cutting holes into our building envelope, which is supposed to be keeping warmth or cool air in and keeping the other side out and basically keeping the noise out. We're cutting holes into it, and that's the window part. And so that's why windows are probably the most important part of the building envelope to really get right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I wanted to ask, what is Green Fortune's like US unique selling proposition compared to competitors, perhaps on the market? Like, why are they doing something cheaper or faster? Because I can understand. Yeah, if you can elaborate on this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, you could break it down into starting from the most obvious or the most basic to more specific stuff, which is perhaps a little a bit more esoteric. At the most basic front, they're solving for like a problem of the very large missing middle. So the options today in the market, when we looked at them, was you have what I guess could be described as a luxury option, which is addressable to only a very small proportion of the customer base in India today, in terms of, call it, luxury windows and doors. And then you have a very long tail of what I would call mostly subpar options in terms of the quality of windows, doors, and windows, which is at the end of the day, for the most part, just fabricators slapping on their own white label, and there's no further development of any sort of customer customer empathy or any way of incorporating what the customers want into the offering. And the way that manifests is too few colors, perhaps very poor and bland selection of colors or materials, and different configurations of windows and doors. So I would say this is, in my mind, the biggest and most important aspect of what works in Green Fortune's favor. The other is more specific stuff. So, for example, different choices of materials by going after suppliers based not just in India but elsewhere. Different configurations of doors. So Patrick spoke about insulation, shutters, etc. So offering more options like double glazed windows, etc., which has very low penetration in India, but there's increasing demand for it as an alternative to reduce the dependency on air conditioning and so on, because as you guys might be familiar, it gets very hot in India during the summers. And interestingly, they also have special products. I think I don't know, I've not seen those kinds of doors outside of Germany. But again, I don't know how to explain it on a podcast, but there's this kind of handle to doors which you get where, based on how you configure the handle, it either opens all the way or it opens just a little bit, etc. Patrick, do you know what such doors are called?
You're talking about windows, right? Or doors? Windows.
The cool thing is it can be both. That's the cool thing. It's both a door and a window depending on how you configure the handle.
Oh, you can tilt them like you're tilting them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So the interesting thing is
that's a normal thing in Europe.
Very normal here. Very abnormal outside of Europe.
Yeah. Correct. So what they also found is there's like a segment of the audience which has seen such products in Europe and want that to be incorporated into their homes in India, right? So they also have specialized lines like that, which I also thought is interesting. Apart from that, there's other interesting thing, imagining themselves as a full service provider, even have other sorts of grills and stuff to add to the windows for maintenance of that as well. In certain cases where they don't want the windows covered with glass because they want ventilation to come in, to take care of other sorts of, protection to make sure insects and other pests, etc., can't come in. So you put other kinds of things. So I think it's imagining or reimagining what a windows and door maker could be for a big middle and expanding middle class in India, which has distinct taste and wants more.
Got it. Okay, on the raised $4.5 million itself, like where is this money going to go? Like what do they need the money for right now?
So I think a lot of that will go into building the brand, opening a few more experience centers. So right now they only have one experience center, as they call it. Actually, maybe I should stop and explain what an experience center is, because Green Fortune is not the only company in our portfolio which has experience centers. We also have Inframarket doing it. We have Brick and Bolt doing it. So think of an experience center as being like a retail outlet or a retail storefront. Usually it's combined with an office space where, for example, the ground floor will be the retail space and the floors above will be the office space, where you can actually take the customer through a selection of what sort of products and services you can offer. Generally, you will not have inventory in these sorts of retail spaces. It'll be more a small sample, and a salesperson would walk them through different configuration options or different SKUs. So it'll go into, so the idea is to build out maybe a few more experience centers, market the product more, especially in a D2C format, which is what they've got started a few months ago. Apart from that, I guess business building, some of the money also helps them raise additional debt, which also serves working capital purposes, etc.
Shub, I know you have a very particular liking to specific avatars of companies. What was the avatar that spoke to you here?
You mean like X for Y type thing?
No, more like your taste.
Look, so the way I think of it is, so a few different questions, and not all questions can be adequately answered for every opportunity. One is, do I visualize an outcome where it is very plausible? It is very plausible that this company can scale to yield a very large outcome. And definitions of very large outcomes, of course, vary, but do I visualize, for example, a multi-billion-dollar outcome here? If yes, are the assumptions needed to make that happen very severe? Or can I sort of get behind the assumptions needed to make that happen? And if that needs to happen, are these the founders who are the best fit? Or is there any other better team or better company already doing this? When I asked myself these questions, I at least felt very good about Green Fortune. I acknowledge it's again like a quirky bet. When you talk windows and doors manufacturer, it doesn't really scream, "Hey, how is this a venture style bet?"
Inframarket is not sexy neither.
It is sexy. It is sexy today. It
wasn't
sexy.
Back then, zero.
Back then it wasn't. So I would like to believe again there's some aspects here, and I also find it interesting because even though on the surface, I mean, especially the press thing that you have put over here for folks who are not seeing it and maybe watching it, it's just described as a windows and doors manufacturer, which is as boring as it gets, I suppose. But I think when you combine the fact that it is a consumer facing product, so you get the power of a brand, and you are changing the way doors and windows are considered to be manufactured through a cloud manufacturing model. I think there's also innovative aspects here which give them some defensibility and moat on the way to being a valuable business.
There are a few things that I think we all have to consider for this category. So we mentioned the cutting holes into the envelope and the impact it has on energy efficiency, noise, etc. That's one. Two, it's one of the touch points in your home, like haptic touch points that you will touch the most next to your light switches. Like, think about that. It is literally in your home, the building components that your hands will touch the most. And with that comes a certain haptic experience. It comes a visual experience. It is important if you want to build a home that is, for almost all people on this planet, going to be the single biggest purchase that they will ever make. And especially if it's then a custom home or a home that they have saved a lot for, it is a great experience to have, or it can be a very poor experience to have. And that's one of the reasons why Windows as a category, doors perhaps as well, has one of the highest margins across the markets, across the industry, right? Globally. Because people care about this category. So I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing is, when you look from the outside at a building, and you like the building, just optically, visually, you think it's hey, this is a high quality building, this is a visually, aesthetically pleasing building. The likelihood that you will like the building because of how the windows look is extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
Comes with what the framing is. It comes with what the finishing and the texture of the framing is. Not just how big the windows are or how they are styled as part of the building. And so with that, windows is such an important category to the end consumer experience, which in turn is an important category for developers, because developers can obviously turn around their stock much quicker if end consumers like this building more than another one. They can perhaps charge that little bit extra on a per square meter or square foot basis. And so that makes windows and doors, door handles comes on top, Shub, such an important and valuable category, right? And so that's where I think beyond Shub, what you have said, and let's maybe talk about the manufacturing, how Green Fortune organizes that. But before we go into manufacturing, beyond that, there is such a great branding opportunity here. And when I say branding, I don't mean, okay, we do a lot of YouTube halala, but that's part of it perhaps, but actually how you install it. That's why I was giving the European example. And that's why I was asking you, Shub, about the demand side structure. If you have a high share of custom manufactured windows, you cannot make a great window and give it to a poor installer. That does not work. You have to have a great window and you have to give it into an installer base that you have trained very well, that you have tied to your brand, that speaks for the brand, that makes sure that the windows are very properly installed. Martin talked to me about thermal bridges, right? I mean, you have to get the window installation really right for it to be great. But then when it is right, the customers love it. It's the single or second most touched point in your home.
And
just to close out what Patrick said, and I hope the numbers I'm recalling correctly from when we analyze Green Fortune as an investment opportunity. On average, what we found is windows and doors constitute about 8% of the value of the home in terms of spend, but the ratio actually skews upward as the value of the home goes up. So in other words, if either the value of the home increases, or if you as a homeowner want to increase the value of your home further, you'll actually start spending more than 8%, maybe 10%, maybe even more of the value of your home on doors and windows.
I wanted to ask, what's their business model and how are they going to make money?
So there's two channels. There's sell to. So one is they sell to fabricators, and the other, actually three. So one is they sell to fabricators, the other is they sell to developers, and the third is they sell to consumers directly in the direct to consumer model. In the sales to fabricator model, so what they do there, which is a relatively small proportion of the business, they sell the output, which is again Green Fortune branded windows and doors, to the fabricators to sell to their existing clients. And this, I would argue, is the least brand accretive of the sales channels, with the only, I guess, good aspect being it's still sold as Green Fortune's own products. But the positive is it needs no incremental sales or distribution effort. You're utilizing existing networks as they are to just push your product without any incremental effort. The next is to go to developers, where, for example, when new multifamily units, apartment complexes are being built, Green Fortune is pitched as the preferred window supplier or door supplier for these developments. And the third is direct to consumers, where, for example, if you're a customer looking to change out your doors and windows, or you have a raw structure where you're looking to decide, or you decided which doors and windows you want, and you don't want the power to be given to someone else. You basically reach out, do your own diligence, and come directly and make a selection with Green Fortune about choosing to go with them. So most of their revenue today is earned through the sales of the product. So it's very simple like that. A portion of their revenue also eventually factors in maintenance and recurring services, which, by the way, is another aspect we like. we've evaluated some other businesses, before. Patrick and I, have loved to look at businesses. I mean, we can't go too far into detail in this discussion, but firms like PoolCorp, ThyssenKrupp, etc., Otis, and the like, who find a way to combine products with some sort of recurring services. And I think this model also fits that description and adds a bit of resilience and stickiness to the business.
Were they profitable before you approached them, or?
So, okay, without going into specifics, if you look at net profitable versus EBITDA, at an EBITDA level, yes. And I believe at a net level, they'll get there soon enough.
Uh-huh.
What I liked about it, Shub, when we discussed it, Martin, to your point, it's a great example of the Dolphin founders that we like internally. So Dolphin Founder in fundamental language is a founder that follows the philosophy of coming up for air before a funding round. And the coming up for air motion means that you prove your profitability. Not on a gross margin level. That's not the profitability. I mean, if you're not profitable on a gross margin level, you don't have a business. I also don't mean profitable on a contribution margin after marketing and sales level. If you can't be profitable on a CM level, you can't distribute your business. I'm talking about the profitability on an EBITDA or ideally net profit basis. And so the Dolphin founders, they come up for air and proving the EBITDA profitability before a funding round to prove that A, their business is actually able to achieve that, and B, to prove that they themselves as founders are true blood entrepreneurs and not just some VC style founder that is able to continuously spin a narrative in order to spend and burn more money. But then you raise capital to take new bold bets again, and then the dolphin goes underwater again. So we like this motion a lot, and Green Fortune had exactly that motion, Shub.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Anything else that is very relevant to Green Fortune we haven't touched on?
We haven't really talked about the manufacturing part. Is that something
we can actually
share? Or
good question, because is the technology here within the cloud manufacturing, or is there any new technology within the fabrication of these windows? Seems like there's a cloud manufacturing tech layer rather than. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So look, I think it depends a great deal on what your threshold is of defining what constitutes technology. I would say here, the technology or the innovation is on streamlining the way the supply chain or a production line works in a manner where you get the same quality and control over the output as you would if you owned the factory, owned the facilities, without actually owning the production line and the facilities yourself. So the way they do that is they work with fabricators as well as suppliers of glass, UPVC, etc. And for many of these suppliers, perhaps I think for most of these, sorry, my correction, I'd like to correct myself. For most of the fabricators they work with, Green Fortune constitutes pretty close to 100%, if not 100% of the business they do. So think of them as small selected fabricators for whom, who are completely beholden to Green Fortune for their revenue needs. And for therefore, Green Fortune commits to them the demand that they expect to see, right? And in return, they'll incorporate whatever suggestions Green Fortune has about the finished product line, what specifications it needs to meet, etc. In return for the predictability and the security of the revenue coming through. And Green Fortune therefore gets to market the output from these fabricators as Green Fortune's own branded windows and doors. Now, you can call it a business model innovation and not technology. My view is it is mostly a business model innovation. I'll not hide behind that. But to operate it at scale also needs you to incorporate pieces of technology which connect all these things properly. So you cannot run it, for example, off of a spreadsheet. You still need pieces of technology to connect it at scale.
I always struggle with people looking for technology as the only way to build a moat. I mean, Brad Jacobs built 3 very, very, very successful businesses that are super execution intensive with technology sprinkled in, but in the end, the moat was managing the complexity.
Yeah, that's the thing. That seems like a thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, Great. So I guess actually I've got a question which actually I should have asked you much earlier before we dive into Green Fortune. What's happening in your part of the world where you're looking at startups? Any major shift changes as we now segue from Green Fortune onto the next one?
Yeah, look, I think the last few months are quite interesting. In general, I would say there's a fair bit of optimism. I think if I zoom out a little bit, not necessarily specific to AEC or construction tech, but in general, it feels like, presuming your question is more on the lines of India, I think in India, it feels like optimism for larger rounds has come in a little bit more. In general, what Patrick and I have always observed is there's a bit of a Series B gap in India for whatever reason. It feels like the demand for larger rounds has come back quite meaningfully, and more rounds are happening. There seems to be more liquidity in the market. There's a few rounds happening in our portfolio as well.
Is it driven by internal market, or is it perhaps from the outside capital sources?
I would say it's a bit of both. So I think, look, we had a very depressed 2023 in terms of overall investment activity in India. I would say that was true for other parts. I would say the delta or the disparity seemed to me to be particularly severe in India from anything starting from a Series A. It doesn't feel that severe anymore. Obviously, it's easier to raise on certain themes now, like especially if it's AI related, for example, and not so easy to raise if it doesn't fit popular narratives, as is true, I guess, in most geographies. But it does feel things are opening up. Anecdotally, I come across more and more folks from the Western world who are even considering launching India-only strategies, which was, I think, some time ago inconceivable as something that would be approached. But I think more and more funds and fund managers are approaching these kinds of strategies, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's about time more money flowed into the markets. Look, how will things shape up 6 months down the line? I would like to believe that it'll be even stronger, and I think more reflective of India's growing importance as a venture market.
Mm-hmm. What are these funds are looking there? Is it like a emerging market type of dynamics that they are investing in, or some other aspects?
The interesting thing is, I think a few years ago they would actually call it emerging market. Now I think a lot of folks actually don't say emerging market because, and Patrick
India
will relate
market.
to that's right. So I think a lot of folks, because so look, when we say emerging markets, what are the emerging markets, right? So when we go from west to east, that would be Latin America, Africa, Middle East to a certain extent, India, Southeast Asia. That's kind of what we are referring to. And depending on your definition of what an emerging market constitutes, maybe China as well. So this is kind of like the landscape. And I think a few years ago, people would generally describe it as emerging markets.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I'm finding, interestingly, a lot of them are not comfortable with just calling themselves emerging market investors anymore, because in a lot of these emerging markets that I just mentioned, they've also realized that actually either there's still not enough substance, or it tends to be very up and down in terms of suddenly a lot of froth building up, and then once the bubble retreats, you don't see enough substance. And I think a lot of them are deciding to be very deliberate and actually call out the India emphasis or focus, which I find pretty cool. I mean, for India, it's great because I think for too long we've been bucketed alongside this emerging market strategy. But I think the market is large enough to merit a more distinct strategy, separate from other emerging markets, similar to how China has rightfully been looked at for the last decade or so.
Actually, this fits perfectly. I spoke yesterday. I'm looking at his business card right now. I spoke yesterday with the chief economist and head of research of a large European bank. Met him in person, and we actually talked about markets, etc. And he had a definition of emerging markets, which is basically lots of potential, but lots of ambiguity and uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that applies to India. There's tons of potential, but actually there's no ambiguity and fairly high certainty. The frameworks are clear under which you invest. It's an over-bureaucratic country, but with bureaucracy comes certainty. Mm-hmm. You know what framework you are operating in. There's no sudden changes of government. There is no instability of government to that degree. There is no sudden changes of like 180 degree of policy, etc. So if you want to, I don't think you can apply the term emerging market just because a market hasn't been relevant. I also don't think you can apply the term mature market anymore just because something has been a mature market. So if you take this person's emerging market definition, it's lots of potential, but lots of ambiguity and uncertainty.
Mature markets becoming declining markets, and emerging markets become developing markets. That's my
or some mature markets maybe become emerging markets.
Okay, so having more, let's call it Western funds entering India, you might expect more liquidity, more money. How would that impact the startup landscape, particularly in construction tech? Is it good or bad? Also, I guess from your point of view, it's more competition towards startups that you are looking for. So, any thoughts on that?
I mean, look, on the former, in general, I would imagine it's a good thing. Now, as with any such, a big increase in inflows or diversification of inflows, what you then expose yourself always is the cyclicality risk. So you may go from being underrepresented or underfunded to suddenly again being in bubble territory. So that's something to always keep in mind, which again, going back to what we just discussed, unfortunately, the likes of Latin America and Africa, I think we found these markets are very prone to that. So, like suddenly you'll go from nothing to companies getting funded to crazy degrees. That is something to watch out for. I think we at least haven't seen signs of euphoria, etc. kick in just yet, not since 2021 at least. So but we'll be on the lookout. I think especially on the growth side, there is a lot more that should be happening in India. I'm definitely hoping it plays out to that in that manner. On other funds coming in, construction focused funds, I think we're starting to see some interest from let's call them Western focused construction funds in the Indian markets. I don't know. I'm not aware to what extent they've been active yet, but I see a lot of interest. I would say the more the merrier. I think the market definitely deserves it. In fact, if anything, I would say, hey, what took you so long? If I'm being cheeky, I mean, look, we'll be happy. I think we are happy with when we entered the market, what we've been doing thus far, and I think the market is large enough to support others. But obviously, our ambition will remain unchanged to be in the best firms.
Do you have any funny stories about Western investors not getting the intricacies of India, for example, when speaking with founders or assessing companies?
I mean, look, so some of these are dated, some of these are more recent, but off the top of my head, so I don't want to like call out specific examples in case it puts anyone on this. Oh God. Okay. So I don't want to put anyone on the spot, so I'll just lump together general observations, right? So I think there's a tendency, for example, because perhaps not too many investors go into the depth of what companies do, etc. So it's an extremely high level view. So a lot of other investors who are not exposed to the market will, for example, look at two companies which to us would be extremely different, and then quote them as direct competitors, right? To an absurd degree, where it's clearly to us like an absurdity that they cite them as competitors. Another common question I get asked, which it's interesting, we touched upon it in this discussion as well, is, hey, where's the tech? Where's the tech in this model, etc.? I don't see any software being incorporated here, etc. Right? And that
Fortune could
true.
Be a good example, right? Because someone can say, "Oh, there's no."
Yeah, I mean, look, even infra market. I mean, to this day, I think it doesn't fit the description of what. Say, if you look to the Silicon Valley for definitions of what software and technology represent, I think it doesn't fit that description.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So with more,
I have a small one, Martin. Okay, two. One is more funny. The other is just not funny. It's just interesting. I think we would not be able to make high quality picks in India without Shub.
That's why I guess I call him special guest.
Very, very special to me too. And so that is because you have to tune your founder taste and the taste of business and what has the ability to become great in the combination of founder and business to the local Indian market. If you apply Western experiences to how the founders how you think the founders should communicate. For example, you're gonna make the wrong picks, buddy.
Yeah, that's very
Every
important.
day, any day. You're gonna be if you apply logo hunting with, hey, this founder studied at Penn and then returned to India. I wish you good luck. So that is the taste that you acquired from the West is not going to translate into the highest quality and most generational companies in construction tech in India. So that's the not funny part. Maybe I found it funny. I don't know. Maybe you guys don't find it funny, but I found it funny is, I have had Western investors, both from the US, UK, etc., complain about, hey, whenever we invest in Germany, it's so difficult. We have to get it notarized. And by the way, whenever I hear that, I say, hey, thank Napoleon. Okay, this was not a German invention. This was actually Napoleon bringing that over Europe. The Dutch have the same system. The French have the same system. So it's always dishing on the German notary system. My reply then is, have you done a deal in India? No, but I would like to. I said, no, you don't. Because you don't even like to do the deal in Germany.
Is it,
it's
Yeah.
Is it more,
Dude,
more complex?
It's a gauntlet, dude. It's a gauntlet. You haven't been tested as a founder until you have actually run a business in India. I'm telling you.
Or as an investor. I mean,
as an investor, it really tests you. So I think that's the one. My biggest complaint against India or the state of affairs in India, just make it easier to invest and set up companies and get on with things. I think it is bureaucratic to a maddening degree, I have to say.
And then I love the moment when new investors into India, I'd love to be in the room, when new investors into India that are maybe now touristing the space because in their home market they can't find returns, they're now touristing the space. And if they achieve an exit, at that point they realize, hold on, there is a withholding tax in India?
Yeah.
How do I now explain that to my LPs? I should have mentioned that 7 years ago.
What's that?
I'm looking forward to that moment. I'd love to be in the room then.
What's withholding tax? You can't exit?
No, you can. So thankfully, it's not that sort of a withholding tax. So, but before you repatriate the proceeds from your exit back to the jurisdiction where you're domiciled, your fund, in our case, Germany, we need to pay a proportion of the proceeds to India as a tax.
Which means that when going in, you better have the right setup. But if you discover it in year 7, that's also going to be a fun discovery.
Yeah.
Good. This probably would be it. Maybe just final thoughts on this. So I wanted to touch on the IPOs. Do you guys have 5 more minutes or?
I can go.
Yeah. Okay.
Always for IPOs.
Yeah. Okay. So what about IPO market in India? Like, is there any new IPOs coming? As always, I think, Patrick, we talked about it a little bit last week as well, that some investors, I would refer to my example from an investor from the Middle East saying that in construction tech, there's no IPOs, no one is going public. That's why we are not interested as a general investors in the construction technology space. What's going on in India about IPOs, if any?
Yeah, so I think when we last spoke sometime in October, I think it was just around, give or take, when the Swiggy IPO had happened. I think there's been a few other tech IPOs since. Not at Swiggy scale, mind you. It's slightly smaller scale than that. And also, one of our companies has also submitted the draft prospectus for a smaller listing in the Indian public markets as well. So that's a company called Infra Prime Logistics. Obviously, as we had mentioned in the previous time we got together, I think we are looking at 2 IPOs in 2025 that is still on target. And fingers crossed, both of those will deliver this year.
Infra Prime is doing something different. We have a similar model here in Europe. So they are organizing the purchase, logistics, the entire supply chain from aggregates quarries to construction sites or to ready-mix concrete plants. Ready-mix concrete still is not the default in India, Shub, is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
so a lot of it would go into, for example, street building or directly mixing the concrete on site. So that's what they are doing. They have grown really nicely. Shub, they are net profitable, is that right?
Correct. That's right.
Yeah.
Which probably is not the case in Western world, right? When you think about
Yeah, not
companies.
the other example I know of. Yeah.
Infra prime, infra market, is there any connection between those two? No?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's I guess a beautiful coincidence that both of our first two IPOs start with the word infra. I don't know if there's some magic there, but it's nice when things come together in that weird fashion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you can share on this, but you just say what you can and you want. On the IPO, would a fund like yours be exiting fully or not fully?
I think it depends. I think we'll wait for a bit of price discovery and then take a final call.
Yeah.
Got it. 100x, yeah? Minimum benchmark.
I'll take that.
I'll take that. Okay. Good, guys. Okay. Thank you very much for today, and I will talk to you next week.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.